Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesingrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesingrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. But anyways, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. And Rise with Grief is what you do, right? Rise with Grief is your main thing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Do you mind sharing your grief story?
Yeah. So my husband and I, we have 4 sons, and we had recently relocated in December of 2019. We relocated from Southern California, where we were both born and raised, and all our family was, and we relocated to Florida. And so just kind of on a whim, not really a whim, but we didn't really have a job or a big reason to move other than we felt this deep pull that we needed to move to Florida. And we, at the time, were self-employed. We had our own aerospace company. And so we could really go anywhere. And so we didn't know anybody. It was really scary. Took a huge leap of faith and relocated to Florida in December of 2019. So we all know what happened right after that. COVID shut down the world. We were isolated across the country from our family. And then our 2 oldest boys were in a motor vehicle accident. And that was really, really tragic and really hard, especially because it was in the middle of COVID. So only one of us could go to the emergency room. Only one of us could be in the hospital. It was our 2 oldest boys who were in the accident. So our second oldest son, he was injured, though he suffered the most severe injuries of all the passengers in the vehicle. And he was rushed off to surgery. He had severe road rash up and down his body. He had broken bones. So he was rushed off to surgery. And my oldest son had suffered a head injury in the accident. So of course they did a CT scan of his head just to make sure that everything was okay. And that CT scan revealed that he had a 2-inch brain tumor in his right frontal lobe.
Oof.
So that was really, really a dark time. Like I said, it was in high COVID, so only one parent could be in the hospital. And they would literally monitor us. Like, we couldn't switch in the room. It was, you have to switch outside. And so we were like ships in the night, passing each other. We had 2 kids in the hospital, one recovering from surgery from trauma, the other one recovering from surgery from a brain tumor. And it was so challenging. And I really struggled to make sense of what was happening. But thankfully, the brain tumor was benign and the neurosurgeon was able to remove the entire thing. So my son didn't have to go through chemo or radiation. And it was just a lot of rehab because he did have major brain surgery. So he had to learn how to walk. He had to relearn how to do like fine motor skills. He had to relearn how to do a lot of things. So there was a lot of occupational therapy, physical therapy for him. For my other son who had all these traumatic injuries, it was a lot of physical therapy and rehab for him as well. But we got through it. So fast forward 4 months and we're at the end of 2020 and I am just like ready to close the doors on 2020. I'm like, this year has been awful. And so I'm like, let's welcome 2021. It's going to be so much better. Well, it wasn't. On January 2nd of 2021, my husband ended up in the emergency room because he was not feeling well and he was experiencing severe chest pain, not like a heart chest pain. He said, it's not like my heart, it's something else, but you don't mess around with that. So I'm like, you need to go to the emergency room and get checked out. He did not come home. He was admitted. And for the next week, he progressively got sicker and sicker, and they could not figure out what was wrong with him. They were doing all sorts of tests, and so many different specialists were consulting on him, and no one could really figure out what was wrong. And then eventually, after a week of, seems like, testing everything under the sun, we got a diagnosis of acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which is an aggressive type of blood cancer. So this devastating blow coming on the heels of the trauma that I experienced with my boy's accident and then discovering my son had a brain tumor, I completely fell apart. I was not okay at all. And I had a complete nervous breakdown. Yeah, I had a complete nervous breakdown. And I was just like, felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. And I was just falling into this dark, dark hole that had no bottom. And I was just trying to grasp at anything and nothing was securing me. So that was really, really challenging. I got to the point where I realized that I was so lost that I was not able to be there for my husband. I wasn't able to be there for my kids. And I was so worried that my kids were going to lose 2 parents, that they were going to lose my husband and their mom. And so I was like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I need to figure this out. I need to figure out how to get out of this dark hole. And that's when I started grasping for what I call the light. I started looking for light. And I said I felt like I was falling in this dark abyss that had no bottom. And I was just grabbing for things, but there was nothing to anchor me. The light started to anchor me. So what is the light? The light were the little tiny, tiny little miracles that I had to look really hard to see, but they were there. And when I would find a glimmer of light, I would hang on to that. And that would slow me down from falling. And I would hold on to it for dear life until I saw another glimmer of light. And then I would grab that one. And that was really what got me out of that dark, dark, dark place. And thank goodness, because
Did anybody make you aware of that, or did you just come to it yourself?
no, I came to it myself. I read so many books. I was reaching out to therapists. I was doing all the things that you're supposed to do. I had gotten on Lexapro, which is an anti-anxiety medication. I mean, I was doing all the things that, I was checking all the boxes, but nothing was working. And it was because I was fighting our reality. I was resisting what was, and I was trying to control the uncontrollable. And you can't fight against reality.
No.
Like, it just doesn't work. And I was trying to push down all the emotions and feelings I was having so that I could be there for my family. But that wasn't working. They were just getting bigger. And so when I just kind of, I was playing, it was like I was playing tug of war with the cancer, with our situation, with the darkness. And when I dropped the rope, that's when I was able to look for the light. And when I was able to see that there were things, there was still beauty, there was still good, there were still things working in our favor when I felt like everything was just against us. And that was the only way I made it through.
That is a miracle that you were able to do that in the midst of things still. A lot of people can reach that point after, an event happens, a grief event or something. And then, then they, eventually they're living life again and noticing all those things. And you were already in the midst of it. Of course, with what happened with your sons, you were on the other side of that. So maybe that helped it or something, who knows, but that's remarkable. That's great.
Yeah. And that's what saved my life, because I don't think I would have been able to survive the next 18 months. What came after my husband's diagnosis, I can describe no other way as hell. It was hell to watch the person that I love most in the world be ravaged by disease and be helpless to do anything to stop it was the definition of hell. And I wouldn't have been able to survive that had I not had that anchor of light. And eventually, those 18 months were a roller coaster. The highs were really, really high and the lows were really, really low. And anybody that's gone through an intense cancer journey can attest. And my mom had cancer. I had friends that had passed away from cancer, so I had experienced it. I'm a registered nurse. I had taken care of patients. I had lost patients to cancer. I had experience with cancer, but never like that. Never where it was the person closest to me. My husband and I was his full-time caregiver, and I still had to take care of everything else. I had to take care of our four sons. I had to run our business. I had to, take care of the house and do all the things. It was hell. It was hell. And unfortunately, after 18 months, he did pass away. And that opened a whole nother level of grief that no one can prepare you for. And if I didn't have that foundation in learning to look for the light and learning to see all the tiny miracles along the way, I don't know that I would be able to be sitting. I do know that I would not be sitting here talking to you today. I would not be. And that's why I started my company, Rise with Grief, because when, like I said, I was reading so many grief books. I was in therapy. I was in grief groups. I was doing all the things that, everyone says you're supposed to do. And I still wasn't feeling any better. I was a little bit better, but I was not, there was no joy. I was just like, I guess this is my life now. I guess my life is just going to be, there was no color. I guess I'm just going to live my life in black and white. And I wasn't okay with settling. And so I thought, well, I'll enroll in a life coach school and get certified as a life coach to help myself, because that was the only other thing that I could think of that I hadn't tried. And when I did that, I wasn't even halfway through the program. I think I was only a third of the way through. I saw this huge shift in my mindset, in my nervous system, in my grief. And everything started to come back into color again. And I was like, oh my gosh. When I took the things that I had learned about grief and I combined them with the things I was learning as a life coach, it just was like the light bulb went on for me. And it was at that time I was like, I can't keep this to myself. I have to share this with others. And so that's how my company Rise with Grief came about. And then in addition to that, I also wrote a book about our experience, our family's story, and it is called A Million Miracles and the One That Never Came. And that book is for anybody that is struggling or anybody that wants to be inspired that, life is hard and there are a lot of things that are out of our control, but there is still light all around. You just have to look for it. And the more you look for it, the more you find it and the easier it becomes to see.
How inspiring. I've felt many of the feelings you felt, probably not as long maybe, but that lost time is so scary, when you're just, I had no idea, like after Jeff passed and I was just, Judy had to go back to work and she was off for about a month or so. And then she's like, what are you going to do? Like, you're just sitting here. Am I going to find you up in his room when I come home or something or what? I mean, what are you going to do? And I had no clue. I knew I couldn't do what I was doing. I didn't feel that at all. And that sense of just existing was what you were talking about there. You're just present. You're alive and you're here, but you're not alive. And you need to relearn how to appreciate life all around you and everything. And that's what those little things were. That's excellent. And I started, everyone seeks them out different ways and finds them different ways, but they're there. And that's the most important thing to people, I think. They're there and you can find them. And so that's, so you bring that out for people. Is that something that you try to do for them in Rise with Grief? And I think it's a great name, by the way, because especially the depths that you were talking about you were in. And I'm so sorry for everything you went through. It's horrible.
Thank you so much.
I want to say your husband's name. It's Colin. And I always like to say their name. And so Colin is here with us today. So and I believe that.
Yeah,
so,
no doubt. No doubt.
So tell me about it.
My work with my clients, well, first of all, I meet them where they are. So I have clients who are fresh, brand new in grief, where it's only been a few weeks. And I have other clients where it's been years. And so I meet them where they are. First, we build a really strong foundation on learning how to process those emotions, learning how to navigate their grief in a way that it's not so scary, because grief is this big, scary monster and it hurts so much. So our tendency is to push it away and to run from it. But that's the exact opposite of what we need to do to process our grief. And so first we do that, and then we really dive into mindset and our thoughts, and how our thoughts create our emotions, and our emotions influence our actions or our inactions, and then our actions create a result. And so really just learning how to self-coach their way through their thoughts, and how the circumstance doesn't ever change. The circumstance is something that we don't have control over. It's a fact. But our thoughts and how we show up, that's all subjective. That's all, we can control that. And so we really, really dive deep into that, and how that can shape the experience. And so they can learn how to regulate their nervous system, to process those emotions, and really get into the driver's seat. And, grief is still there. Grief becomes your companion. And so it's still there, but it's no longer driving. Like, you remain in control. Mm-hmm. And that's really what the basis of my work is.
Yeah, the grief story is so important, what you're telling yourself, because I took some grief training as well. And there was a great exercise where you separate, you just document what the facts are of the situation. My son died, and of what or whatever, just the facts. And then you do another exercise where you go through what you've been thinking in your head and all the ways you could have prevented this, or you could have, all these different things that are causing you turmoil and making the story really, instead of what the facts are.
Yes.
And it's good to differentiate that so you can help yourself and get through it, because we lie to ourselves a lot.
Yes.
And beat ourselves
all the time.
Up. Yeah.
All the time. And we believe our thoughts and as truths. And so we don't even question them as being thoughts versus fact. And so one exercise I do with my clients, which is similar to what you were just saying, is I'll say, just do a thought download. Just sit down and don't edit or filter your thoughts. Just write down everything that comes out on a piece of paper, and then go through with highlighter and highlight the things that are fact. And most likely, not very many things on the paper are going to be fact, because our mind doesn't like facts, because facts are boring. Stories are so much more interesting and so much more fun. So it really is just learning to differentiate, because we just believe. Just because our mind presents a thought doesn't mean it's true, doesn't mean that we have to believe it.
Yeah. Yep. And boy, that can kill you too. It can really just, do a job on you if you let those things go. If you let them go in your mind, so. Great. So you get that. Now what else with what you do? Why don't you take us through a little bit of the process for people so they can understand?
I offer 2 programs. I offer one-on-one coaching. That is where they meet with me, just the 2 of us via Zoom, once a week for an hour. And we really dive in deep, all the things. We unpeel all the layers. Like I said, we build that foundation and then build from there, and they learn how to regulate their nervous system. They learn how to ride those waves of grief. They learn how to manage their thoughts and become the boss of their brain. And then also how to move forward from here. Because like you said, you were like, your wife said, well, am I going to find you in his room? Like, what are you going to do? And you were like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. And we don't know. We don't know how to do this. We don't know. It's so scary because it's so unfamiliar. And so it's really what I do is I take their hand and I show them, like, I know this hurts and I know you don't know your way through this, but take my hand and I'm going to show you how to get through. And it's not just a set of instructions. Like, they can get that from any book. They can get that from, it's transformation. I provide results. I provide confidence. So by the time they're done with me, grief isn't this big scary monster anymore. It's this thing that is walking beside you in life, but it's not scary. And sometimes it hurts, and that's okay, because of course it hurts. It hurts because you love. Without love, there would be no grief. And so grief is really, I say grief is actually really sacred, and grief is a gift. And that grief and love are two sides of the same coin. And it's not something that needs to be fixed. It's something that needs to be integrated and something that needs to be processed. And once people realize that, that's when the real healing takes place. So that's one-on-one coaching. And then I also offer a 12-week online grief course that every week they get a video that I've pre-recorded in their inbox, their email inbox, and each week built on each other for 12 weeks. And it's all grief specific, learning how to process your grief, learning how to, all the things we do one-on-one, but in a more hands-off way, more self-paced. There's assignments each week. There's homework assignments. There's a workbook that goes with each week. And that, if they need or want one-on-one coaching in addition to that, that can be added on later, but that's kind of a standalone program.
Mm-hmm. I love how you put it with, we think we know ourselves best, and we usually do. But when it comes to grief, and society's kind of not great at it, and then we're in the midst of it.
Not at all.
So we just need someone to come along, and I'm trying to simplify it for everybody. It's not bad to have someone who's experienced in this just to come alongside of you. And everyone I'm encountering, even if you're doing it, as a service, as a paid service and those things, we're friends. We want to be your grief friend in that and help you understand it. And that's all we want to, we want to help you traverse it, because you do have to go through it. And there's no pushing it away. It's going to come up again if you do that. And we just kind of help with what we know to share to them and help them. And
yeah, it's like a mentorship.
Yeah. And when you tailor it to them, you get to know them. I see that on your site. You get to know them first, and who they are and where they are and what they're doing. And then, you can tailor it to that and help them along the way.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. It's just like coaching with, like a football coach or any mentor coaching. It's just like that. It's not that you can't get to where you want to go by yourself, but it's a whole lot easier, and you're going to get there a whole lot more effectively. I don't even know if that makes sense, if that's a word, but if you have a coach, if you have a mentor, if you have someone that has been there and can take your hand and say, okay, this is what you need to do. This is how we do it, and give you the results that you're looking for.
Yeah. You can have talent in many things, but if you're not given that expertise, then you're never going to be a pro at it, in the sports field and things like that. And it makes sense in your life field too. And you want to be better. You want to be an expert in that field. So you can help yourself be that expert.
Right. And just like you said, like, we live in a grief illiterate society. Society has got grief so backwards and so wrong. And I was guilty of that. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought that too before I look back at some of the things I would say, you know, to quote unquote help someone through grief before I had ever really, really experienced deep grief. And it wasn't to help them. It was to make me feel like I was helping them, but it really was doing nothing to help them because I was trying to fix or do a silver lining of the situation, which there's no silver lining and grief doesn't need to be fixed. So what they need is they need you to just sit in the grief with them and validate their feelings and validate their experience and not try to tell them that they should be doing something different or they need to push it away or they need to just get over it and just, buck up. Like it's been long enough. Like, no, that's exactly the opposite of what they need.
Yeah. That is great right there. Now, as a nurse, you experienced some of this before you encountered all your problems, right? Or your tragedies, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is great. And people got to listen to that and go back and listen to that because you were trying to help people, but it was more self-serving, really. Like, oh, I have all this talent.
Totally
and I can do
self-serving.
these things and everything.
Yes.
See, I was a pastor before too. I did the same kind of thing.
Yes. And it made me feel, it was all about like, oh, well, I feel better because I feel like I, maybe made them feel a little bit better. What you're doing is you're invalidating their grief, which is exact opposite of what they need.
Yes. And then the contrast is when you go through your grief and you experience it yourself, it changes you. And it has changed me dramatically. My love
100%.
and concern for people is off the charts now. And I can hone in a lot better, get out of my own head and hone in a lot better on people's grief and their whatever they're struggling with, whatever they're talking to me about. I mean, I'm more centered. I'm more a listener, a better listener. I just want to help. And so I'm working at myself to get better at all of that. And there's a lot of baggage to work through to get to it, to where I want to be. But, that is a great differential right there that I hope people understand that you can listen to people
really
and get help, but this will get deep and get you through the kind of things that you want to do because the people care. You care, and I care now. And so, you get out of that ego side of things.
Yeah. I actually talk about this experience in my book, but I had a good friend who she lost her daughter to cancer. She was a young wife and mom of two little girls, and she lost her daughter to cancer right before Colin was diagnosed. And so my friend was really, she was like kind of like my mentor through the cancer journey, and she provided a lot of support for me. But again, she was in California. I was in Florida. So it was all virtual because, we were in the middle of COVID. So there was no traveling. But she told me, and this really stuck with me. She told me, she said, Kelci, this experience is going to change you. And how is up to you.
Very good. Yeah. There is no.
So you can either, I see both sides. I see people who get really, really, really bitter and really angry and just kind of cycle in that. And that was the pathway I was headed down in the beginning when my husband, after my kid's accident, my son's brain tumor, and my husband got diagnosed, I was circling down that path of just anger and bitterness and so mad at God. Like, how could you let this happen to our family? Like we are good people. We go to church every Sunday, all these things. Not that matters, but I was just like, like if you like, you're supposed to love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't let this be happening. Like why are you letting these horrible things? I'm hurting. And so I was headed down that really anger, bitter path, but that's not who I am. And that's not how that I didn't want to live in that space. Cancer had already taken so much from me. I was like, it can't take anything else. I am not letting it take anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Who you are. I did the same thing too. And I'm like, wow, I mean, I cannot go through the rest of my life as a zombie. That's basically what I felt like. And I was like, well, in the early stages, many times you just say, well, I give up. I don't care. I didn't care about myself. I was drinking heavily right away and all that. And I was like, I don't care. So what? I'll be with Jeff.
Yeah.
So I really don't care.
Yep.
But that's not me, really. I mean, I like to have good time for sure, but that's not me to kill myself that way.
Right. Right.
And so, yeah, that's important too. You bring those things out of people too. There's a flower and they're ready to bloom, and so you're bringing that out of the folks too, there's goodness in there.
Yeah,
you can get it.
There is, and it's called post-traumatic growth, and it's available. I'm really careful when I talk about that though, because not everybody has to grow from a death of a loved one. Like there's not like a purpose that you have to go through this experience so that you can like be the best person. Like, I don't believe that. I believe there's potential for that. Absolutely. But not everybody has to grow from this. But if they want to, that's available. They can choose that. And post-traumatic growth is a thing.
I think the words, growth, whatever. I mean, whatever you transform into, whatever you change, we're going to change. You're going to change. But yeah, I don't want anybody feeling like they, they're pressured, in some way or whatever to be something. Because we talk about these things in this podcast, and, I'm showing people who have done purposeful things with their grief, but it's just to inspire people, really. I'm not saying that everybody has to do those things. Yeah. And
exactly. It's totally available.
Yeah.
Completely available if you want it.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
yes.
It could be a stumbling block.
It gets a little gray because there's that platitude. Well, everything happens for a reason, or you had to go through this so that you could be this. And it's like, no, because that's invalidating the grief experience. Right. And so it gets a little gray. So that's why I like kind of tiptoe around it. Like post-traumatic growth is real. It's a thing. It's available if you want it, but not everybody has to grow from the grief experience. It will change you.
Yeah.
Just like I said, my friend told me it will change you. How is up to you.
So have you covered everything that you do with the work now?
Yeah. I mean, I have two programs available. I do some workshops. I don't have any planned right now, but I do some workshops. My book should be published. I don't know when this podcast will air, but should be published in August. So next month. And yeah, I mean, I didn't seek out this work. I never thought like, oh, I want to be not even a life coach. I was like, that was not in my plan. Nothing that is in my life right now really was in my plan. Moving to Florida, not in my plan. Losing my husband, certainly not in my plan. Being a grief coach, not in my plan. But, the universe has a way of taking you, I guess, where it wants to take you. And so, yeah, I didn't choose this. It chose me. I feel like it's a calling.
Yeah.
And it's so rewarding. This work is so rewarding. The transformation that I see in my clients, even sometimes just from the first session, is just so healing for my own grief. It gives purpose to my pain.
Yeah. And those people, it's almost like they become best friends to you right away, because you get that bond. And it is so rewarding. There's so much falseness in this world today and everything that it's so refreshing. All the people in the grief community, I feel, are so genuine because of what they've gone through and everything. I'm sure there's scammers out there, but everybody's just, this is real. And this is, we just want to help you through, That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said there's not any other plans right now, or do you have more plans?
Nope.
Nope. This is it.
I mean, I do have plans, but nothing. I do have plans. I definitely have plans. My mind is always working on something, but right now that's all that I have to offer at this time.
Yeah. And so it was 2 years ago for Colin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he passed away in July of 2022, so exactly 2 years ago. And everything happened when our life fell apart was in August. It will be 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So my that's really when my grief journey started, was 4 years ago.
Yeah, so you're definitely still healing those open wounds, the initial open wounds of all of that.
Oh yeah. And I always say, like, my grief is part of me now, and it evolves and kind of changes as I learn how to process it and carry it, but it never goes away. It's part of me. It's not who I am, but it's part of who I am.
Yep. And an unwanted part for sure. Yeah. Kelci, your last name is Jager? Do you say Jager or Jager?
Jager.
Yeah. So not like Jägermeister people, all right? It's Jager.
I mean, I do get that. I get Jagger. In fact, yesterday someone on the phone was like, "Oh, like Mick," and I was like, "What?" Like, I didn't get it. I was like, "What?" And she's like Mick Jagger, and I was like, "Oh." I was like, "No, it's Jager."
Yeah.
But I respond to all of it.
Yep. Tell everyone every time we'll have all your information, the links and everything in the show notes. Of course, everything will be there. And I got a bio of Kelci there too, that you'll see. Anything else? I always ask anybody, is there anything we didn't cover or anything that you want to say that is on your heart?
If you are grieving, know that you're not alone. I know it feels like you're the only one that is experiencing this pain or knows this absolute devastation. You're not alone, and you will get through this. Grief is a tunnel. It's not a cave, and it's a journey, and you will be the color will come back into your life, but you have to put in the work. It's called grief work for a reason. It doesn't passively happen. You have to put in the work, and the work is so, so, so worth it.
Absolutely. We can attest to that, right? Both of us have been through it.
Yep.
So we're just two more witnesses of that. Well, Kelci, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and your work is fantastic.
Thanks, Tom, for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
I love the things you put out there are refreshing and very well done. And I encourage people to look into your work. So thank you again. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.